The Great Depression. Most people alive today didn't have to live through it, but it left an indelible mark on many memories. And you might have had a parent or a grandparent that was frugal later in life or had a sensitivity to waste due to their experience of doing without during the Depression. And physical reminders of Nevada's recovery are still visible here in Reno. And on this episode, we're going to visit 12 sites where we can view and appreciate the work of people restoring their community. And if you're a young person watching this and wondering why we should care about events that happened 90 plus years ago, I'm here to tell you that these programs rolled out by President Roosevelt in the 1930s it's a monumental, glowing example of the government doing substantial things to benefit and serve the people. Millions of people benefited from these programs, and many families were saved from complete destitution. There are lessons to be learned here that we can apply even today. So let's find some locations here in Reno that are examples and reminders of FDR's New Deal to the American people here on the Reno You Know. When FDR came into office in 1933, 1 in 4 Americans was out of work, and Roosevelt and the government needed to do something to help alleviate the suffering and to stabilize the economy and the banks. So dozens of programs were created which created jobs and strengthened the country's infrastructure and simply gave people the hope for a better tomorrow. And these programs lasted up until the beginning of World War II, which is when most people agree that the Great Depression ended. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was one of the great presidents. He came into office during the Depression and guided the country through that, and then served into a 4th term, leading the country through the Second World War, and doing most all of this from a wheelchair. Here in Nevada, to help combat the effects of the Depression, and 2 years before FDR took office, we enacted 2 pieces of legislation that were completely unique in the country. In 1931, in order to discourage folks from leaving the state and to draw people in, wide open gambling, as it was referenced then, was made legal by the signature of Governor Fred Balzar. Also in that year, the state legislature made changes that resulted in the creation of the Nevada divorce trade. Anyone that lived in Nevada for just 6 weeks were considered a resident and they could obtain a divorce, a residency period which was just unheard of in the country at that time. Back on the national level of the long list of agencies that were created, we're going to look at what was built here in Reno due to the following 3 agencies: the Works Progress Administration, the Public Works Administration, and Roosevelt's favorite, the Civilian Conservation Corps. This is the Geiger Lookout, which is a turnout on the Geiger Grade road between Reno and Virginia City. And this is a place that has had some people scratching their heads over the years, wondering, what the heck is this place? Well, I'll tell you, in 1936, the modern Geiger Grade between Reno and Virginia City was constructed with funds and manpower from the Works Progress Administration, which I'll just call the WPA going forward here. And the new Highway 341 replaced the old Geiger Grade, which was the original grade up the mountain, windy and dusty. It's the little road that winds down below us. I documented a 4-wheel drive trip up the old grade on my Black Bart episode if you'd like to see what that looks like in depth. I'll leave a link to that video in the description of this one. This lookout area has been here since 1938 when it was constructed as kind of a recreational stopping point on the highway. The WPA sent money and workers for the construction here, and they put up the stonework features that we see here today. The WPA had a unique style of stonework, which is really evident in a lot of the structures here at the Geiger turnout. These steps today kind of go up to a little landing. There's not much else on this area. This restroom structure, which is no longer in service, is just a classic example of WPA building. Just using all the native rock here. And gee, thanks for the graffiti, folks, but still great to see that this is still standing. There's several structures at this lookout, such as this. This is an old grill or barbecue. And then over here, I believe they put in wells. And there's a concrete foundation here. This might have been to support a picnic table. But I don't think you can use these grills anymore, but they're sure cool. This little area is known as Thorpe Point. I'm not sure who Thorpe was, but he sure had a scenic view. You see the Truckee Meadows all spread out before us. I'm filming this on Christmas Eve, and a storm just came through last night and it's still lingering now, and it is cold out here. But I will survive, but it's a beautiful view from up here. There's also several of these unnamed structures. I'm not exactly sure what they are. There's these two holes which posts might have gone through to support, I don't know, a sunshade or something like that. But there's several of these here. Here's more examples of those barbecue grills, and each one has a little well next to it. And this one's right here on the edge with the picnic table support. What a grand location to have a picnic on your way from Reno to Virginia City in the 1930s. One of the fun things that they constructed, and one that almost everybody visits when they come to this lookout, is this little area. And there's the plaque of Mr. Geiger, for whom the Geiger Grade is named. And they laid in all these rocks up here and created a love seat, and that's how they referred to it. A little love seat made of stone that looks out across the valley. And a little cloudy today, but normally you see Mount Rose, Slide Mountain, and you certainly get a great panorama of the Truckee Meadows from way up here.
In September of 1958, way before I came along, my then 20-year-old dad stopped here on his family vacation trip, and I have my granddad's Kodachrome slides from several of their family holidays. This one is of my Uncle Bob enjoying the view from this very spot, and I could not resist recreating it.
All right, let's head back down into Reno for our next New Deal stop, Stewart Park. This is Stewart Park at the corner of Stewart and Wells Avenue. And way back in the day, this 1 acre parcel was a city dump. And in 1937, the WPA came in and made several enhancements to this property.
The defining feature of this park, and the one that tips you off that this was a WPA project, are these really cool stone walls that surround 3 of the 4 sides of the park, and some of them consist of multiple levels. This stonework done by the WPA has that distinctive look to it, and these walls might remind you of those structures that we just saw at the Geiger Lookout. And if you look closely at the top of the southernmost wall, you can tell the year that there was some repair and preservation work done by the city. This newspaper story from 1936 says that crews on the average of 30 workers were busy that year making upgrades to 5 city parks.
Did you know that Reno has a Roman aqueduct? This super cool guard railing near the university on Fraternity Row on 9th Street here in Reno was built by the WPA. And again, we can see that familiar stonework. A lot of people drive by here every day, but I bet you a lot of them miss this plaque, which tells us who built this and when.
There was a gravel pit and possibly a quarry about a mile west of Reno on Old 4th Street, where most of the construction materials for New Deal projects in the area were sourced. It's possible that the stones for this railing came from there, but unless we get a geologist to confirm it, we'll just have to say that they might have come from there.
Just down the road from that 9th Street railing here at the southern edge of the University of Nevada, Reno, is this irrigation canal. And Reno, being situated in the high desert as it is, used to have many ditches and canals running through town to get water around. And if you know where to look, you can still see many of these today.
In 1940, the WPA came in and installed this dam, which holds back the water of Mansita Lake, which is an important landmark on campus. And they also reinforced the canal walls in this area with concrete. And here, adjacent to this bridge, is a WPA brass plaque inside the canal. It says, built by WPA, 1940, sponsored by the University of Nevada. The WPA did not mark all of their projects with signage, but it's just cool to see the ones that they did install have survived since the Great Depression. I've seen this canal very full of water in the spring. It's the off-season for big flows right now here in winter.
If you like to take walks around or go fishing at Virginia Lake, then you can thank the Works Progress Administration for putting this in 1938. Back in the day, a fellow named Roger Teglia sold the Washoe County Commissioners on purchasing this land, and he reportedly threw in some of his own money to help get the job done. And so the WPA came in and constructed this lake, and it was originally intended to be a recreational lake, which it still is. And also the city today uses it as sort of a rain barrel during wet weather episodes. The lake is fed by a little canal on one end and leaves in a drain in the other end. And so when this lake opened in 1938, September 1st, 1938, the lake had already been stocked with 100,000 rainbow trout. And estimates of up to 1,000 people showed up that first day to go fish, and many people caught their 10-fish limit.
After the project was authorized, work crews came in, starting with about 25 guys and topping out at 60 workers. There were day crews and night crews, and they dug out this space fairly quickly considering the size of the project. This lake covers 25 acres and has a maximum depth of 12 feet.
Due to the size of this project, it's very possible that the Civilian Conservation Corps was brought in to help with its construction. And if you're not familiar with it, this was a fantastic program, and it was actually the largest peacetime mobilization in American history. After President Roosevelt signed off on its creation, 275,000 young men between the ages of 18 and 25 signed up and came aboard, and their primary function was work in forests and parks.
In total, between 1933 and 1942, 3 million young men that had been unable to find traditional work during the Depression ultimately participated in the CCC. They were paid $30 a month and were required to send $25 of that back home to support their families. And in many instances, times were so tough that that $25 was all the family back home had to live on. The CCC boys, as they were known, also received food and shelter, training and education, and health care. According to the National Park Service, nationwide, the CCC operated 4,500 camps in national parks and forests, as well as state and community parks, planting 3 billion trees, protecting 20 million acres from soil erosion, and aiding in the establishment of 800 state parks. The CCC advanced natural resource conservation in this country by decades. Other accomplishments of the CCC included the restoration of 4,000 historic structures, the construction of 3,100 fire lookout towers, the building of 1,500 cabins, the installation of 5,000 miles of water lines, the creation of 4,600 fish rearing ponds, the improvement of 3,400 beaches, and 6.5 million man days devoted to firefighting.
I like everything I've read about the Civilian Conservation Corps. I think this is one of Roosevelt's best ideas, and I wish the program was still around. I think our young people would greatly benefit from it. And technically speaking, the program was never officially terminated. Back in 1942, the country kind of had bigger fish to fry, so Congress simply pulled the funding from the program. And I was thinking about it as I put this episode together. A lot of those 18 to 25-year-old guys, after serving their families and their country and learning how to work and become men in the CCC, a number of them must have found their way into the U.S. Armed Forces and then found themselves overseas, and a lot of those guys never came back. And so projects like this that they built, this is part of their legacy. This is the south entrance of the Galena Creek Regional Park, which is kind of south of Reno at the base of Mount Rose. And according to maps that I found, there was a CCC camp here called Camp Galena. Now, the CCC had camps all across the country. There was one here, and at this park they were said to have constructed the Fish Hatchery building and also a ski lodge, or a ski building, a ski hut, not a ski lodge, just more of a hut, and also ski trails during their time here. So we'll see what we can see. There's a bunch of snow here. There's hardly any in town on this December day, but there's a good foot here, so we'll see what's seeable. The fish hatchery building that we're going to visit here at Galena Park is accessible from the south entrance, but I'm here at the north entrance right now at the visitor center, and I stopped in here and asked the folks inside if they knew the exact location of Camp Galena, and they didn't. But even if they did, the location would probably be covered up with snow and we wouldn't be able to see it anyway. But we can pretty much assume that Camp Galena was either near one of the entrances of Galena Park or somewhere in between. All right, we're going to hike up to this old fish hatchery building at the south entrance. And while we do that, I've got a question for you. How am I doing with these videos? Once I publish this one, it'll be my 60-second video. And I'd love to hear your comments, hear your thoughts. According to my YouTube analytics, 60% of you are watching this on your TV, which is great. It might not be easy to leave a comment on the video using your TV. So when you're done here, could you please navigate back to this video on your phone or on your computer, which would be great because you'll have a keyboard. And I'm walking up here, so I'm getting a little winded uphill. Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. I read every comment. I read every one of them, and I try to reply to as many of them as I can. So please leave your comment and thoughts. And also, I've started a Facebook page tied to this channel. If you go to Facebook and search for The Reno You Know on YouTube, you'll follow that page, and you'll be able to see announcements and behind the scenes and things that you won't be able to see anywhere else. All right, let's head up to this hatchery building, which is pretty interesting.
I read online that the CCC was supposed to have built this structure that covered the hatchery operations, but when I got here, I found two interpretive markers that say that the hatchery opened in 1931, and I also found a newspaper article to support that date. But seeing as though FDR didn't take office until 1933 and the New Deal programs would follow, they couldn't have built this in 1931. Maybe it's possible that a temporary structure was here until the CCC built this building later. I don't know. If I were a betting man, though, I'd say that the New Dealers didn't build the building itself, but they certainly came in later to do improvements, as the signs here state. In 1938, general improvements were made here, including work on the water system, and they added a new rearing pond and a stone retaining wall. This hatchery was closed in 1949 after more modern facilities were opened closer to the Truckee River.
One of the CCC projects in our area was the construction of a fish hatchery, which was contemporary to the Galena facility, and that hatchery was somewhere out here in Verdi, Nevada. There's not a lot of information that I've been able to find about it, but I did find a map that gives the approximate location of it out here in Verdi, so that's where I'm at today. I'm going to bushwhack a little bit here off the road and see if I can find the location. Maybe there's an old building foundation or something like that. So let's go take a look. All right, do you know how Verdi, Nevada got its name? This area used to be a stop on the Central Pacific, the Transcontinental Railroad, and every stop needed a name, and I can imagine what the conversation was. Okay, what are we gonna name this one? And so Charles Crocker of the Central Pacific Railroad pulled a name out of a hat, and that name was the Italian composer Giuseppe Verdi. And that became the name of the town, and over time it became Americanized, and today most people just call it Verdi. All right, let's see what we can find. From Google Maps, I looked at that location, and I saw what might be an outline of a property or maybe ditches. It's hard to tell until I get out there, so we are on the way. All right, there's a deep ditch of some kind here in the middle of nowhere next to the river, so that would seem to me to be appropriate for a fish hatchery. There's just nothing out here. And yeah, the river's right over there, and oh, hey, here you go. All right, we're on to something. There's a concrete divider or a foundation of some sort, and it does run for quite a while. Up here too, where it turns on an angle. Boy, I'm gonna guess that this is not the foundation of a building, but maybe of a rearing pond, because it's pretty substantially sized. And yeah, that concrete would have been poured in the 1930s. Let's see if there's anything else. Hey, hold the phone. What is this? Oops, rocky out here. All right, there's really no reason for this old thing to be out here other than it was part of the Verdi Fish Hatchery. Interesting. All right, well, I think this is all we're going to be able to find, but to me, this tells me this was the location of the hatchery. And I really wanted to find this for two main reasons. You know, there were a lot of fish hatcheries in the United States, but this one was built in the 1930s and today is abandoned. And I love me some abandoned stuff. And also it was built by the CCC. And I can imagine those 18 to 25-year-old guys out here getting a good day's work in this picturesque location. All right, this is pretty interesting. There's these, right adjacent to the old hatchery are these river rock piles. And there's a lot of them here. Boy, I can imagine that when they were digging out the ponds and such for the hatchery, they would have run into huge amounts of these rocks, these river rocks, and they had to do something with them. But you'd think they just cart them off and put them in a big old rock pile. So why all the separate piles? Interesting. Gosh, I guess another hypothesis could be that this property was tilled or cultivated at some point, and you know the farmer had to get the rocks out of the field. But still, why all the separate piles in that, not just a big rock pile? I guess another theory, these are Native American. I don't know. And I guess another theory could be space aliens left them. All right, we are at Whitaker Park, which is on a bluff overlooking downtown. And Whitaker Park is bordered by Interstate 80 and Washington and Ralston Streets and University Terrace. The park property here has an interesting history, and it saw improvements by the WPA in the 1930s. The name Whitaker Park came from the fact that this location used to be the site of the Whitaker School for Girls, which was founded by a Bishop Whitaker of the Episcopal Church, and it operated from 1876 until 1894.
In the 1870s, the bishop saw the need for educational facilities in Reno, and especially for girls, and he was able to get this parcel of land donated by Charles Crocker of the Central Pacific Railroad, who offered a choice of several parcels that the railroad owned. This was a high-end facility, and only folks with money could afford to send their girls here. The end of it came a few years after 1886, when the bishop himself moved to Pennsylvania, and in that same year, the University of Nevada moved from Elko to almost next door to the school, and the university didn't charge tuition. The school closed in 1894, and the building was used for a few other purposes over the years, including a dorm for the university and a hospital for a while.
At some point, the old school building was taken down and the property was converted into a city park. In the 1930s, the WPA came in and made several improvements here, including installing these tennis courts, and those are still here today. That's pretty cool. And they also planted a lot of the trees that are also still surviving here to this day.
And just to bookend at this segment, right across the street from Whitaker Park is this building, the only surviving building from the Whitaker school days. This was probably a dorm building, and it was moved across the street here many years ago. But it's pretty cool to see the last surviving building of the Whitaker Academy.
There are two heavily used bridges in downtown Reno that we can thank the New Deal for. This is the Lake Street Bridge, which spans the Turkey River and is right next to the old Reno Arch on Lake Street and the National Automobile Museum. And this is the Sierra Street Bridge. Both of these bridges were completed in 1937 with funds provided by the Public Works Administration. If you look closely here at the Sierra Street Bridge, above the supports you can see the Art Deco flair of this old bridge, and that look was popular in the 1930s for sure. We can see these Art Deco features over the supports on the Lake Street Bridge too, which is really no surprise because both of these bridges went up in the same year, 1937, and I guess would probably have been put up by the same contractor. This is the only remaining portion of the original railing of the Lake Street Bridge. And you know, this bridge is old and things do deteriorate, so at some point the rest of the old railing had to be replaced with metal. And it's very possible that these street lights are original to the 1930s bridge as well.
The Sierra Street Bridge is probably going to get replaced in the next few years, as it is old and more frequent maintenance won't correct the deficiencies that it has. The life expectancy of a bridge like this is 75 years, and this one is now past that mark. The Lake Street Bridge is the same age, but I think there were improvements made to it several years ago.
The very first golf course in Reno opened at this site, which is adjacent to Plumas Street, in 1917, which is the same year that the U.S. entered World War I. It was initially called the Reno Golf Club and was a much smaller course than what we have today, the Washoe County Golf Course. And divorcees that were staying in Reno played here. Ben Hogan won a tournament here, and once I read that even President Eisenhower played a round of golf here once.
The Reno Golf Club continued into the Depression until it couldn't make it financially anymore, and in 1933 it was closed. Enter the Federal Emergency Relief Administration and the WPA, and more land to the north of the old club was obtained from Washoe County, land that was the site of the old Reno airfield. This was known as Blanche Field back in the day and was used primarily as a stop on the transcontinental airmail route, and the first plane landed here in 1920. And of special note, Charles Lindbergh, who made the first solo transatlantic flight in 1927 between New York and Paris, he landed that plane, the Spirit of St. Louis, right here in September of 1929.
Construction of a new larger 18-hole course started in 1935, and the Washoe County Golf Course opened in 1936. And incidentally, the land behind me, the golf course land, was traversed by immigrants and gold rushers back in the 19th century on their way west to gold fields and new lives. This is a really cool old school building, and the only remaining building in the downtown Reno area that was a school. The Southside School Annex was completed in 1936 with funds contributed by the WPA. And it was called the Annex because the main Southside School was located right next door where the Terry Lee Wells Discovery Museum is today.
Back then, the town was growing and more space was needed, so the school district applied to the WPA for funds to build this structure, which was designed to house the kindergarten and a couple of other grades, with a large auditorium on the second level. The main Southside School was demolished in the 1960s to make way for the new Reno City Hall, which opened on today's Discovery Museum site in 1965. And if you look on the south side of the Discovery Museum today, you can see that this side of the old City Hall was preserved in the makeover, including the copper facing on top. This building was designed by Reno architect Hewitt C. Wells, and it has a mid-century kind of feel, like the Washoe County Library close by, which he also designed. Today, the Annex building is the home for offices of the University of Nevada, Reno and Sierra Nevada Journeys, and they both lease space from the city of Reno. I fully anticipated not being able to get inside of this building due to the university being on winter break, and I made 2 trips down there anyway just to find the doors locked and no one answering the phone. However, on a 3rd try, I found one gentleman each at both the university office and Sierra Nevada Journeys, and they were nice enough to let me in to show you the following. My friend and historian Alicia Barber shared these photos of the upstairs auditorium as it looked when she took these in 2014. The original woodwork and trim were still visible, as well as the old iron truss work from 1936.
Well, a nice gentleman let me into the auditorium portion of the old building, and it looks different than the old photographs I have from Alicia. Apparently Tesla has come in here and made a new robotics center, and I guess a lot of kids come in here and still do learning in the old school building here. And you can see the old truss work from 1936 up above. And this was the old stage. I don't think they have productions here anymore. But this is just so cool to see this. Can you imagine all the kids, during World War II that used this as their auditorium? And this would have been the old stage right here. And looking out into a crowd of kids. This is a fantastic 21st century reuse of a early 20th century school building, this K through 12 robotics center. This is probably alive with kids even now, so what a great use.
Here's some quick context for the other neat feature in this building. Ernest Batchelder was one of the main figures in the American arts and crafts movement of the early 20th century, and he produced fantastic tile work with his kiln at his studio in Southern California. His tiles proved to be extremely popular, and they weren't cheap, and examples can be found in homes and businesses across the U.S. In his tile work catalog that I found from 1923, there is a 3-piece set featuring the story of Old King Cole.
Well, a nice gentleman from the Sierra Nevada Journeys actually let me into the old Southside School Annex building, and I'm getting to see what I really wanted to see is this old tile work, the Old King Cole tile work. This used to be the kindergarten, and so appropriately they put in something like that. And I did some digging, and I found that this piece is actually in an old Batchelder tile catalog from 1923, and so it looks like this was a standard catalog piece at this time. But isn't that just charming?
This 1936 building still has its nice old original Art Deco entrance, and also this architectural embellishment featuring the likeness of the wise old owl.
This is Plumas Park, located at the corner of Plumas and Walker Streets here near Midtown Reno. And you might not know this, but this parcel was the home of the first Billinghurst Middle School, and that was named for the beloved Superintendent E.D. Billinghurst, who served here for many years, and now there is a new Billinghurst Middle School up in Northwest Reno. The school opened here in 1930 and served the community for over 40 years before it was torn down in the 1970s.
The old gym building is still standing and functional here in the park. During the time of the New Deal, improvements were made to the school grounds here, including these rock retaining walls which surround the property, and they're much like those we saw at Stewart Park. Tennis courts were also installed at this time, and today those serve as basketball courts.
All right, thanks for hanging out to the end of this video. I sure appreciate it, and I hope you learned something. I certainly did myself. And before we go any farther, I'm going to take off this hat because it's bugging me. We are finishing off this episode at IMBIB Custom Brews here on 2nd Street near downtown Reno. And I believe IMBIB's been around for about 9 years or so. And they brew everything in-house. They also have another location at the Legends Mall in Sparks. And today I'm enjoying an Imperial Stout, and I forget the name of it, but it's their Imperial Stout. It clocks in at 12.4%. It's a wonderful winter warmer. So please come down to IMBIB Custom Brews and check out their Imperial Stout or any of the other number. I believe they have about 20 beers on tap. All things for all people. So come check it out. Hey, if you want to learn more about what we talked about here today, I highly, highly recommend the documentary by Ken Burns, The Roosevelts. In my opinion, Ken Burns can do no wrong. Everything that he does is just solid gold. And the Roosevelt's documentary, they go through the Teddy Roosevelt years. Teddy was, of course, Theodore Roosevelt was a much beloved president, and he is on Mount Rushmore for a reason. And then they go into the Franklin Delano Roosevelt years, and you can see how he dealt with his disability and follow him through his presidential years and see the other women in his life. It's real interesting. So check out the Roosevelts. We streamed it on PBS. I don't know if it's available anywhere else, but you can do some digging. It is on PBS, and it's fantastic, so check that out. Also, if you'd like more information, check out the website of the Living New Deal. It kind of catalogs New Deal sites across the country and in Reno, so you can read about other sites. I picked 12. There are more New Deal sites. We only have so much time, but you can read about the others. And astute viewers might say, hey, Steve, you forgot the downtown Reno post office, which was a fantastic WPA site. I didn't forget about it. It's such a fantastic building that I want to dedicate an entire episode to it. So it's not on my calendar yet, but it will be. Watching the weeks and months to come, if you would. And another website or app that you should check out is Reno Historical. Reno Historical is a free app that you can download on your phone, and you can read about all kinds of historical sites in our town. It's a project by Alicia Barber, who helped me with the photographs of the Southside School Annex, and it's also involved is the Historic Reno Preservation Society. So Reno Historical, there's a website and a free app, so whatever works best for you, check those out. All right, and I also want to show you something really cool that I learned how to do with my video editing software. Check it out. Cool, huh? Please like the video. Just click that little like button if you'd be so kind. Helps give the video traction and allows more people to see it. And if you subscribe to our video, it helps us grow the channel, and that'll help me be able to generate even better content for you down the road. So I'm off to work on my next episode. I already know what it's going to be, and you're really going to enjoy it as well. So, as Harold S. Smith Sr. of Harold's Club always said, I'm with you. Cheers.